There he was, across the crowded bar, a blast from the high school past. Mark still got that dumb grin and those eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled. My heart did a stupid little jump in my chest. Totally ridiculous. We hadn't spoken in years, not since I moved across the state for college. Married life, 2.5 kids, the whole PTA routine. That wasn't exactly the setting for rekindling old flames. "Hey stranger," he boomed, navigating the crowd with surprising ease for a guy who probably hadn't seen the inside of a gym since graduation. We hugged, the scent of his cologne a forgotten memory that instantly transported me back to stolen kisses in the back row of the movie theater. We ended up talking for hours, catching up on lost time. It was harmless, right? Just reminiscing. Laughed about that time we snuck out to that all-night diner after prom. He still remembered my order, a double bacon cheeseburger, fries, and a chocolate milkshake. Me? I couldn't even remember what John had for dinner last night. John, my husband, the responsible one, the steady paycheck, the guy who mowed the lawn on a Saturday without being asked. Great guy, John, but safe, maybe a little too safe. Mark walked me to my car, the conversation lingering a beat too long. A playful brush of his hand against mine sent a jolt through me. "We should do this again sometime," he suggested, his voice a low murmur. The thought sent a thrill down my spine, quickly extinguished by a pang of guilt. "Yeah, maybe," I mumbled, fumbling for my keys. The drive home was a blur. Images of Mark's face kept flashing before me, superimposed on John's patiently waiting on the couch. By the time I walked in, the guilt had morphed into a dull ache. John looked up, a smile lighting his face. "Hey, you're late. Everything okay?" "Yeah, just a crazy day at work," I lied easily, the first brick in a wall I knew I shouldn't be building. John didn't pry, just pulled me in for a hug. The warmth felt foreign, almost suffocating. I excused myself for bed with a headache, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. Sleep wouldn't come. My head throbbed, but it wasn't just the invented headache. It was the guilt, a low hum that vibrated through my bones. A harmless conversation? Maybe. But the echo of Mark's laughter, the memory of his touch, whispered a different story. A story I wasn't sure I wanted to hear, but one that refused to be silenced. My inbox notification dinged, a jarring sound in the quiet morning. John was already out the door, whistling a happy tune that grated on my nerves for some reason. It was an email from Mark, a simple reply to the one I'd sent the night before, fueled by a restless sleep and a desperate need to connect with something, anything, outside the monotony of my routine. Opening the email felt like cracking open a forbidden fortune cookie. It was just a few lines, asking about my life, my kids. How did he even know I had kids? But the casual tone sent a spark through me. Memories flooded back. Stolen glances in chemistry class, late-night phone calls giggling about nothing, the nervous thrill of holding hands at the pep rally. Stupid teenage stuff, right? I typed a response, a harmless update on life, marriage, the weather, anything to keep the conversation going. A little voice in my head, the annoyingly responsible one, tried to scream at me to stop. But a louder voice, the one fueled by a strange, restless yearning, drowned it out. Hitting send, a wave of exhilaration washed over me, quickly replaced by a prickle of guilt. I slammed my laptop shut, the sudden movement startling the cat who swatted at me with a disdainful paw. Dinner that night was a disaster. John, bless his oblivious heart, was in a chatty mood. He rambled about a new client at work, his voice droning on and on. I tried to pay attention, really I did, but my mind kept replaying Mark's email, dissecting every word. "Penny for your thoughts?" John asked, his playful tone grating on my nerves. I forced a smile. "Just tired, honey. Long day." My voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. He frowned, the playful glint in his eyes fading. "You seem distant lately. Everything okay?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unwelcome. How could I tell him the truth? That my mind was miles away, reliving a past I shouldn't be dwelling on? "Just stressed," I lied again, the taste of betrayal bitter in my mouth. John reached across the table, taking my hand. His touch, usually comforting, felt foreign. "We should do something fun this weekend," he suggested. "Just the two of us. Remember that cabin we talked about renting?" The thought of being trapped in a secluded cabin with John, My mind, consumed by thoughts of another man, filled me with dread. "Can't," I blurted out before I could stop myself. "Work thing. Important deadline." John's smile faltered completely. The disappointment in his eyes was a punch to the gut. "Oh," he mumbled, pulling his hand back. The rest of the dinner was a silent exercise in misery. The guilt gnawed at me, a growing monster fueled by the lie I just told. But the thrill of the forbidden email exchange pulsed beneath it all, a dangerous counterpoint. My phone buzzed on the counter, shattering the quiet of my lunch break. It was a text from Mark, a simple question about my weekend plans. My heart hammered in my chest. This wasn't harmless reminiscing anymore. This was a proposition, a secret invitation hanging in the air. Panic warred with excitement. This was crazy, risky. But the thrill of the unexpected, the chance to escape the predictability of my life, was intoxicating. With trembling fingers, I typed a reply, something vague about needing to check my schedule. Hitting send, a wave of nausea washed over me. What had I just done? The rest of the afternoon was a blur. Every email notification sent my heart racing, every phone call made me jump. Finally, 5 o'clock crawled around. I lied to Sarah about joining her for yoga, a hollow pit forming in my stomach. Then came the real challenge, convincing John. "Hey, babe," I chirped, all fake cheer. John looked up from his computer, a smile lighting up his face. "Hey yourself, early finish?" "Yeah," I mumbled, avoiding his gaze. "They dumped a last-minute project on me. Gotta stay late to finish." John's smile faltered. "Ah, that sucks. You want me to order takeout?" No, I'll grab something on the way." The lie felt heavy on my tongue, the weight of it settling in my gut. John frowned, a flicker of concern in his eyes. "You sure? You look fine," I snapped, harsher than I intended. "Just a long day, that's all." Shame burned in my throat, but the excitement for the forbidden meeting thrummed beneath it, a pulse quickening with every passing second. I rushed through my late work meeting, a fabricated conference call on speakerphone in my empty office. Every minute felt like an eternity. Finally, freedom. I practically sprinted to my car, the guilt a dull ache in my chest. The drive to the meeting spot was a blur. Traffic lights seemed to last forever, every car on the road an obstacle. When I finally pulled into the dimly lit parking lot, my hands were shaking. Taking a deep breath, I steeled myself. This was just a stupid mistake, a harmless escape. Nothing more. Except it felt like everything. Stepping into the bustling restaurant, my eyes scanned the room until they landed on him. Mark, sitting in a corner booth, a mischievous grin splitting his face. The thrill was undeniable, a dangerous spark igniting in my chest. But as I walked towards him, a pang of longing for the familiar comfort of John's smile washed over me, a fleeting reminder of what I was risking for this stolen moment. Tuesdays became training days. Every week, the same drill, fabricated late meetings at work, a rushed dinner with John, who, bless him, never questioned why I barely touched my food, and then, the stolen hours with Mark. Each rendezvous was a whirlwind of excitement, a desperate escape from the routine of my life. But the thrill was tinged with guilt, a constant shadow that stretched longer with each meeting. Groceries piled up on the counter, laundry overflowed the hamper, and John's once playful nudges about chores turned into frustrated sighs. The spark I used to feel for shared activities, movie nights on the couch, weekend hikes with the kids, had dimmed, replaced by a dull ache of dread. Then came the near miss. Leaving Mark's apartment after another stolen Tuesday, I practically collided with a familiar face, Sarah, my coworker, on her way to the gym. Panic clawed at my throat. Did she see? Did she recognize the place? Back at the office, every glance from Sarah felt like an accusation. When John casually mentioned seeing her car at the gym that evening, my heart lurched into overdrive. I mumbled an excuse, the lie tasting bitter on my tongue. That night, the guilt was a suffocating weight. I lay beside John, staring at the ceiling, his steady breaths a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. The next morning, John was distant. The playful banter was missing, replaced by a quiet seriousness that gnawed at me. Over breakfast, he suggested a weekend getaway, a chance to reconnect. I forced a smile, the words scraping against my raw nerves. A weekend trapped with John, the weight of my secret pressing down on me? The thought was unbearable. That sounds lovely, babe, I lied, my voice cloying even to my own ears. But I have that presentation next week. My voice trailed off as his gaze met mine, a flicker of something I couldn't decipher in his eyes. The tension crackled in the air, unspoken accusations hanging heavy between us. An argument erupted, fueled by frustration in the ever-present ghost of my deceit. We yelled, words laced with anger and hurt. But the worst part wasn't his anger, it was the quiet sadness that filled his eyes, a reflection of my own shattered reflection staring back at me. The weekend getaway was still on the calendar, a stark reminder of the life I was jeopardizing. The thrill of the secret meetings had faded, replaced by a gnawing fear and a desperate hope that the facade hadn't crumbled beyond repair. Mark wasn't satisfied with stolen Tuesdays anymore. He started dropping hints, thinly veiled suggestions about leaving John, starting fresh. The thrill of the chase had morphed into a suffocating pressure. Fear, a dull ache that had simmered beneath the excitement, now bubbled to the surface. One Friday night, after a particularly stressful week juggling work, kids, and the secret life, I reached for a glass of wine. Then another, and another. The usual buzz felt different this time, a heavy cloak of numbness settling over me. With blurry vision and a reckless streak fueled by the alcohol, I unlocked my phone. A text to Mark began innocently enough. A recap of the week's drudgery, a complaint about John's obliviousness. But with each keystroke, the inhibitions loosened. The words poured out, a toxic cocktail of guilt, frustration, and the desperate question, is this what it's all worth? Hitting send, a wave of terror washed over me, instantly followed by a wave of nausea. Clawing my way to bed, I clung to the sheets, the enormity of my stupidity crashing down on me. Sleep wouldn't come. Only a relentless replay of the past few months, the stolen moments with Mark, the growing distance between me and John, the lies that had become my new reality. The morning light brought a fresh wave of horror. No reply from Mark yet, a terrifying silence that screamed of potential disaster. John, bless his oblivious heart, was humming a happy tune while making coffee. The sight of him, my husband, the man who loved me unconditionally, filled me with a crushing sense of dread. On the counter, nestled amongst the breakfast things, lay a photo album. John had pulled it out, a nostalgic look on his face. It was filled with pictures from our younger days, awkward prom photos, goofy vacation snapshots, the early days of our marriage, filled with a love that shone brighter than any camera flash. My throat tightened. This was what I was risking, the foundation of a life built on trust, laughter, shared dreams. Was a fleeting thrill with Mark truly worth throwing it all away? The answer, stark and undeniable, slammed into me. No, it wasn't. The phone buzzed on the nightstand, jolting me awake. My heart hammered in my chest, a text from Mark, maybe? But the premonition chilling my gut told a different story. It was John. One word starkly displayed on the screen. Explain. My stomach lurched. He'd seen it. The stupid, drunken text confession that spilled out of me like a festering wound finally lanced open. Panic clawed at my throat as I raced downstairs, the silence of the house deafening. There he was, in the living room, the incriminating phone clutched in his hand. His face, usually etched with lines of laughter, was a mask of pain. John, it's not what it looks like, I stammered, the words pathetic even to my own ears. My justifications, the excuses I'd rehearsed in my head 100 times, crumbled under the weight of his gaze. He just stared, a million unspoken questions swirling in his eyes. I wanted to reach out, to explain, to beg for forgiveness, but the words wouldn't come. The enormity of what I'd done, the life I'd jeopardized for a fleeting thrill, choked the air from my lungs. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he spoke, his voice a low, broken rasp. Get your things. John, please, I croaked, tears blurring my vision. Let's talk about this. He shook his head, a single tear tracing a path down his cheek. It was a look of utter betrayal, a wound I'd inflicted with my own reckless hand. He moved like a ghost, packing a single duffel bag. No anger, no yelling, just a quiet, crushing sadness. As he walked towards the door, a part of me hoped he wouldn't leave. But another part, a more honest one, knew he deserved better. He paused at the doorway, his gaze lingering on me for a single, silent moment. Then, with a quiet sigh, he was gone. The slam of the door echoed through the empty house, each bounce resonating in the vast emptiness he left behind. I crumpled to the floor, the weight of his unspoken words crushing me. The thrill, the excitement, it was all gone, replaced by a suffocating emptiness and the deafening roar of regret. The house, once a symbol of our shared life, felt like a tomb, every corner echoing with the ghost of my shattered marriage. The future I'd so carelessly jeopardized stretched before me, a bleak landscape devoid of his love, his laughter, his forgiveness. Days bled into weeks, a monotonous blur punctuated only by the deafening silence of my phone. No text from John, no desperate voicemail begging him to come back. Just nothing. The silence was worse, a constant reminder of the gaping hole I'd ripped in our life. I tried calling, leaving messages that echoed unanswered in the void. The charade of normalcy at work was excruciating. Fake smiles and forced small talk felt like sandpaper on a raw wound. Sarah, bless her oblivious heart, kept asking if John was on one of his business trips again. I choked back a humorless laugh. This wasn't a business trip. This was the fallout of my stupidity. The pitying looks from neighbors as I walked the dog were a fresh kind of torture. Whispers followed me like a bad smell, the details of my mess undoubtedly the juiciest gossip in the neighborhood. I retreated further into the shell of my guilt, the shame a suffocating cloak. The house, once a haven of laughter and shared dreams, became a constant reminder of what I'd lost. Every corner held a memory. John's worn armchair, the chipped mug he used for his morning coffee, the mismatched socks he always left on the floor, a source of endless amusement, now a painful reminder of his absence. Finally, I reached out to a therapist, a desperate attempt to claw my way out of the pit I dug for myself. Talking about it was excruciating, reliving the selfish choices, the reckless abandon that led to this devastation. But somewhere between the tears and self-loathing, a glimmer of clarity emerged. The thrill of the affair, the excitement of the chase, it was all a cheap substitute for the real thing. The love I had with John, the comfort, the shared history, I'd thrown it all away for a fleeting fantasy. The road to self-forgiveness, the therapist warned, would be long and arduous. But for the first time in weeks, a flicker of hope ignited within me. It would take time, maybe a lot of it, but I had to start rebuilding. Not the life I had with John, that might be lost forever. But a new life, one built on the ashes of my mistakes, a life where I could finally learn to live with myself again. The therapist's words echoed in my head. Self-forgiveness is a journey, not a destination. It was a slow climb, each session a battle to confront the ugly truth of my choices. Yet, a sliver of hope had taken root. I craved normalcy, a life beyond the suffocating walls of regret. But as I started piecing together the wreckage, a nagging truth gnawed at the edges of my conscience. There were things I hadn't told the therapist, secrets buried deep, about the true father of the children, and a past with John that wasn't entirely sunshine and roses. These were burdens I had to face, truths that would reshape the narrative of my life, of my marriage. Sharing them felt like tearing open a wound that was just starting to heal, but the alternative, a future built on half-truths, was even more terrifying. Would John ever take me back? Could our love survive the avalanche of my betrayal, layered on top of secrets I'd kept hidden for so long? This story, dear reader, is far from over. There are layers yet to be peeled back, truths waiting to be revealed. If you want to know what happened to John, if the buried secrets shatter everything, or if there's a chance for redemption, let me know. Hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. If we reach 500 likes, I'll reveal a juicy update that will change everything. Until then, I leave you with this. The path to healing is rarely smooth, but sometimes, the most profound truths lie hidden in the shadows of the